bet it's
right there.
Oh gosh, can't even miss it. And right here.
Warning, the Catholic Man Show is about to begin. If you're looking for dull, feel-good religion, or clap your hands, sit around the campfire kumbaya, you've come to the wrong place. We are dealing with toxic levels of authentic masculinity. I would say good luck, but luck is for pagans.
Welcome one and all to the Catholic Man Show. We're on the Lord's team, the winning side. So raise your glass. Adam Minahan here, sitting with David Niles. Juan Posada on the buttons. Jim is here at the door. We got the whole crew here tonight. We're going to be sipping on a little bit of bourbon this evening. Talking about a very interesting topic that I've not really thought about too much up until about a month ago. Talking about how teenagers aren't real.
They're not real. They don't exist.
So anyway, stick around for that. But before we get to there, the whiskey we're drinking this evening is Ranger Creek 36 cask strength Texas straight bourbon whiskey, ABV 65.7%.
That's kind of a long name.
Yeah. It was given to us by a attendee of the Catholic Man Show Campout, which we greatly appreciate. Which is this 36 Texas cask strength bourbon is a rare release, using only a few barrels, hand selected by the head distiller, handcrafted in at their San Antonio distillery, aged and matured in the Texas heat. This whiskey is a unique and bold expression of Texas Terrier. Among the best they've ever bottled.
Okay.
So that's a bold statement, but this finish is smooth, the flavor is bold, the craftsmanship is uncompromising. Enjoy the bourbon the way our distillers do, straight from the barrel. Share it with your friends, or just keep it to yourself, is what it says.
It's hot.
So, we're on the Lord's team.
I'm jumping the gun. The winning side.
So raise your glass.
Cheers to Jesus.
Cheers. Dark amber in color.
I do like the color.
Smell of cinnamon, a little nutmeg, and the tannins of the wood are very strong. What do you think?
It does have a lot of good flavor. So a lot of those things you mentioned, cinnamon. I think, but it's hot. It's spicy.
Wow.
Okay. You can really tell.
Kind of makes you jump up and down a little bit.
That it's barrel strength. Was
wow.
Good for 65%.
Yeah.
Almost 66% alcohol.
Wow.
And
go very modestly on this.
you can tell.
Yeah.
That it's strong.
Wow. Okay. I didn't realize.
So, like, if for some reason you find yourself in North Dakota for some reason and you're trying to stay warm,
this is good.
This'll do you.
Okay. Yeah.
Because it is hot.
Mm-hmm.
I do like it though.
I do too. Has a strong fish?
It has the flavor.
Ooh.
It's not just hot.
Right.
So yeah, I like it.
And it's fitting for being in the month of November, the month in which we pray for the poor souls in purgatory.
Okay, I was wondering where you were going with that. I dig.
Yeah. One of the things that we do in the Minahan house that I encourage you guys to do as a family is we go to the cemetery to pray for the souls at the cemetery.
Yeah.
And one of the things, we've talked about this on the show before, but it's been a year, so I can talk about it again.
Yeah.
What we do as a family is we pray the rosary, and we just start somewhere in the cemetery, and we say the person's name on the headstone, and then say a Hail Mary, and then go to the next one, say a Hail Mary. And so we pray for each of the people as we go down the row, and it's really interesting to see what your kids say, and think afterwards, because they want to know, like, well, who's this person? When did they die?
Yeah.
When were they alive? And then, there's different things on the headstones of people, whether they served in the armed forces or,
mm-hmm.
They have different just different things about them and on their headstone, right? And so the kids always want to know, like, who is this person?
I don't know. But it looks like they were into music.
Right. They liked dogs.
Yeah.
It's really it's a cool practice that we do. I enjoy it a lot.
Yeah, so you guys go headstone by headstone. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
I take a different approach.
Mm-hmm.
I just kind of casually walk, and my intention is to pray for each person I pass, both sides. Right? Get more people. I'm just trying to scoop them
Well,
up.
we start out by saying we pray for all the souls in this cemetery.
All right. So you've got one of those legal clauses that it covers your bases. I see.
But then we go through and say for particular saints, or well, maybe saints, but particular souls.
Hopefully they are.
Yeah.
I mean, there's certainly just playing the odds. There's some.
Right. Even though the path is narrow.
You're right, but there's some.
There's some. Yeah. So that's always a good practice, especially as Catholics, we pray for the poor souls in purgatory.
Yeah.
This is
and you can get a plenary indulgence
mm-hmm.
for the souls in purgatory during the octave
of All Souls Day.
Yeah.
So it's been a busy week. We as you guys probably noticed we didn't have an episode last week. I was out hunting. Took my boys out hunting this last weekend, and Luke, my oldest, got his first deer. Which
Sweet.
was awesome.
Way to go, Luke.
Got a buck.
Way to go, godson.
Yeah, got a buck, which is cool. First deer.
Yeah,
is
totally.
a buck. As some of you know who listened to the show, last year he shot a doe, but we couldn't recover it. We didn't find it.
Supposedly he shot a doe.
Well, I saw it.
You did.
I saw it. I witnessed it. He shot it. But
my understanding was that maybe there was some question over whether or not.
No, he shot it,
Okay.
but it was it
just didn't find it.
Didn't find it.
That's tough.
Which is rough.
That's really tough.
But this one, we got. It was really cool. He shot it. We saw it bed down. We thought, okay, it's going to go, lay down and die. And so I got all my kids, and we went around the other way with my truck. And actually, Leo was running up and jumped it. And the deer took off only about 10 yards because he's actively dying.
Yeah.
But it was like it kind of scared him a little bit, which is
Leo.
yeah. Because he's just running up there, and then all of a sudden the deer jumps up and takes
alive!
off. Yeah. But yeah, so it was really cool. Luke got a chance to help clean it, and we Euro mounted it. So we did that yesterday together.
You did it already?
Yep. It's out in the backyard right now.
Sweet. Very cool.
So it was a cool day. I can't tell you how much I loved. One, spending the time with the boys out in the woods,
Yeah.
right?
Uh-huh.
But also that moment of him shooting the deer, and getting his first deer.
Yeah.
And him, he was so proud. He was so happy.
Well, he's been working hard for a couple years now.
To get one, and the hug that came afterwards, and just the emotion, the raw emotion that happened. It's just one of those moments as a dad you cherish.
Sure.
So it's just really, really cool to experience that with him.
Yeah, that is awesome.
So
I want to give a shout out to my sister,
Becca.
Becca, who got engaged here in the last week or so.
She did it.
She did it.
Old Tim pulled the trigger.
Yeah, that's right. Her fiance Tom, who's awesome. We really love Tom.
Yeah, we like.
He's great.
Tell him why I said that.
I had decided the first time I was meeting Tom, I was gonna, do what was my duty as the older brother and provide a little hazing as a welcome to the family. Potentially, we'll test your mettle a little bit. Mm-hmm. And so I had decided I'm gonna call him the wrong name all night, all day, all dinner, and then they'll correct me. It's like it's Tom. It's like, gosh, Tom. I'm so sorry. And then a few minutes later, call him Tim again, or Trey, or whatever.
Yeah.
And to the point where you get it. You're messing with me.
Right.
Gotcha. Yep. All right. Cool. but I totally
You blew
chickened
it.
out.
You blew it.
I just couldn't do it. He's such a nice guy. I just I couldn't do it, you know? And until but I had resolved I was going to. And so at the very end of the night, I was like, all right, well, great. Nice to meet you, Tim. And I left. And then as I'm walking away, it's like, no, now you just look like a jerk.
Yeah.
You know, you looks like you actually don't know his name. The point was that it was supposed to be funny. And like, he was going to definitely know, you know his name, but you're messing with him on purpose. He has no idea. He really just thinks
You're
I
a
called him
jerk.
Tim.
Yeah.
And I don't know his name. And so it was terrible. Totally backfired. But anyway,
It's okay.
we're very happy for them.
Yes.
So we were at an engagement party. Juan was there this last weekend. And we're all sitting around watching the Bedlam game, bruh.
OSU.
I told you the Cowboys were going to win.
You did.
Now, I was completely sarcastic. This is also several weeks ago before the Cowboys decided to play football.
Right.
They made a good choice. Anyway, we're at this engagement party, and I look down, and there's a kid's cup with Kool-Aid in it, and inside is a Yellow Jacket, just on the inside of the cup. And so I grab it, and I start swirling the Kool-Aid and get that Yellow Jacket in there. And I hand it to Juan, and I was like, hey, Juan, I'll give you $20 if you drink this. And he goes, 35. And I said, deal. And without looking, he just throws it back. And I was watching him going, Juan, there was a Yellow Jacket in there. He's like, I didn't look, man. You owe me $35. And I was like, you're right. You just drank a Yellow Jacket, man. You did. It was so funny. I'm holding it out. It's like $20 if you drink it. 35. Deal. Boom. What? You didn't even look? I thought for sure you would look and you wouldn't do it. But you did it. Anyway, very funny.
He lived.
Yeah.
And he lived.
Yeah, I mean, he seems fine. I was a little bit nervous, though, when he just... Oh, man, that... Was my first thought was, that is going to suck. Because I thought...
If not now, later.
I thought for sure you're about to get stung in the mouth.
Yeah.
By a Yellow Jacket, no less, you know?
Did you not even feel it?
I felt the legs as they were going down my throat. And then I was like, oh, there's something in here.
Oh, it's crunchy.
Well, I didn't chew on it. I just...
Yeah, you just drank it.
There was just a little... I could feel there was only a little bit. I thought, like, maybe there is something like a goldfish.
Hey, let me just tell you, it's a good thing we didn't go to college together.
So good.
We wouldn't have make it.
I don't know if we'd all be alive.
Just too much tomfoolery.
Indeed. Timfoolery.
Tomfoolery. What's it say?
Not enough video.
Did it cut off?
Welcome back to the Catholic Man Show. I'm David Niles here with Adam Minahan. We're drinking some 36 cask Ranger Creek 0.36 cask strength Texas straight bourbon whiskey.
This is so strong, this could kill a Yellow Jacket in
Yeah.
your belly.
Definitely. I feel
Definitely
like
kill Yellow Jacket.
I feel like just about any insect, if
die, yeah.
like was in this, they're gonna die.
Yeah.
Anyway, planted some wheat this last week. Pretty
Oh,
excited
nice.
about that.
Yeah?
Gonna make some bread.
Nice.
Yeah, I think.
Maybe.
Yeah, we'll see.
Potentially.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll see how potent
you
it
know.
is, and if it
Right. Could totally be a flop.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Okay. Well,
But
that is exciting.
Excited about it, nonetheless.
So, about a month ago, we talked to a good friend of ours, Jason Craig, who is the editor of Sword and Spade. If you guys haven't signed up for Sword and Spade magazine, it's a phenomenal magazine. I really enjoy it. And he talked to us.
He's also doing an interesting class. If you're interested in homesteading,
Yeah.
and you want to like,
It may have already happened, or it's
Well,
happening this week.
I think they're in there. There's something they'll continue to do. You can go
Yeah.
check out his website, where
St. Joseph's Farm.
yeah, you can go take a class on how to homestead,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's for you and how to get started.
Which is an important,
Yeah.
I think,
Definitely a lot of rising interest in the concept.
no doubt. But we were talking to him, and he raised up a notion that the word teenager, that teenagers weren't a thing.
It was not. This was not a concept I was aware of until we both heard him
Say this.
speaking on this the other day.
And at first, you have this. So we're gonna talk about this tonight. And at first, you have this like pushback reaction, I think, or at least I did. I had this like, I don't know, like I like the idea of where you're headed, but I don't know if that's really true or not. And not that I thought he was, a liar.
Adam thought he was a liar.
No, I didn't think he was a liar. I just like,
You know what, Jason? You're a liar.
no, not at all. But I wasn't aware of this thought process. It was just new to me, and so
Yeah.
like when there's this new concept that seems such a, I guess pun intended, juvenile, concept, you're like, that can't be.
Mhm.
And so you just think like, I don't know what you mean by that. Anyway, so he was talking to us about how teenagers is a relatively new concept
Yeah.
in society.
The idea of distinguishing as a category of
Right,
man.
Yeah.
And I think specifically, I think we can really kind of talk about it with regard to men,
Well, we will tonight.
because
Let's do that.
but women, just young women, don't fall into like, they don't get the teenager label quite as strongly
as men.
as young men do.
Right. But so we've talked about on the show many times that as a parent, as a father, we're called to protect, provide, and establish, right?
Yeah.
And protecting and providing, we've talked about on shows many of times, so you can go back and listen to those shows if you're interested. But we've also talked about establishing and like what it means as a father to establish your children to go out, and become disciples of Christ, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that they go out and preach the gospel to everybody, and evangelize the culture.
Right.
And I think this conversation really is surrounded, kind of encompasses this idea of establishing your children as, as a father.
Uh-huh.
Your role as a father is to establish your children. And because he's talking about like how teenagers this is an invention in the last like less than 100 years.
Yeah, what was it, the 40s? It was the
About
first,
the 40s, yeah.
The 40s was the first recorded use of the word teenager.
Right, and
And that's the 1940s.
1940s.
I mean, yeah, it's just very, very, very recently.
Right, and up until that point, there was just two categories. There was children, and there were adults.
Mhm.
Right, and although teenagers were this kind of awkward, they were going through puberty, like there was this awkward phase, right? They were still grouped with the adults due to their physical appearance,
Mhm.
which I think is very interesting, right? Because they're they look like a man, that they were grouped with the adults.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, they were just considered young men who just weren't very good at being men yet.
right.
But they were still counted as a young man,
Right.
not as a boy. And there was no teenager. I mean, hey, you're a man now. It's time for you to start being a man and acting like a man and getting better at being a man, because that's what you are.
Because that's what we are now.
Yeah.
And when we created this teenagers category, and revoked them from the adult category, it created this. It like isolated them and created their own classification, right? Because now if we say like, oh no, you're not an adult yet, but obviously you're clearly physically not a child anymore. So
Right.
we have to come up with this new category, namely the teenager.
Yeah. And if you think about, like, what does that do? There is a sort of like the way the law is a teacher. The category of teenager has a similar effect on the thinking, on the mind of the people who are being and receiving this label. So if you're a man and you're a young man, I'm pursuing the ends of a man. That's what I am. That's what I need to be. Mm-hmm. Okay. So now all of a sudden, you're not a man, you're a teenager. Okay. Well, what is a teenager? Well, a teenager is, someone who's basically carefree, has no responsibilities, is just, needing to go to school, and basically that's it. And you can do anything else you want. Okay, so if that's all I'm having to pursue now, so I'm doing whatever I want. So you're pursuing the idea of doing whatever I want. This
Self-gratification.
pursuing the notion of no responsibility.
Pursuing the pursuit of self.
Exactly. And so it creates, it becomes a self-fulfilling thing almost by giving and like having this label. Now you're creating teenagers as opposed to men.
Right. Yeah, and we'll talk about that more even later on in the episode. But it's interesting because here we are, we're separating them from the adults. And so you have teenagers who in their body form are mature, but you're letting them be kind of like what you were saying, the only thing that they've known thus far, which is a child.
Uh-huh.
And so you're not allowing them to meet their end or grow towards their end. And as men, we're called to virtue, right? The pursuit,
Right,
is virtue, is to be a virtuous man. But a child can't be virtuous yet.
right. Not
Not in that same sense.
in the full way.
Right. So what does this have? Like, let's talk about the effect that this had on culture. Okay. So up until like about the 60s and 70s, there was only one culture, and it was the adult culture. So the adults set the culture.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But then we allowed these teenage years, and the youth actually became the culture.
Right.
Right. So like, it's no longer the adults are setting the ways. The youth now are creating the culture. And this has, obviously, as we've seen, very detrimental effects to society, right? Because what happened was this youth culture became this decidedly different and rebellious counterculture, which we saw very easily because it generated this like distrust in the adults, right? And we see this all the time, even in the domestic home, right? If the father does not do what he's called to do, namely be the head of the home, what happens? It creates a void and it creates a vacuum, and the kids then say, "Oh, well, he's not doing it. I guess I can do it. I guess I get to make my own rules."
Yeah.
And the order in the household becomes disjointed, and the child doesn't know the place and the role that they have in the home, right? So same thing happens in a much bigger scope, in the countercultural hippie movement, right? There's this distrust.
I was just thinking about that.
There's this distrust in just authority in and of itself. It's like, oh, well, I no longer trust you because you have this authority. It's clear, like just from natural law, that you have a specific role, and you're not doing your specific role. You've surrendered your role, and so now why would I trust you with the role that you have? Because you're not fulfilling your role, and so now I don't trust you anymore. The trust relationship has been broken. So what now? I'm like worried about authority. I'm worried about like there's resistance there, I guess.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about what happens to a man when he is now becoming, in quotes, a man at a later age. Okay.
Well, hold on. Before we do that.
Okay.
Let's pause because I want to just kind of I want to put a period on this culture aspect.
Okay.
And how there's so many different things at play during this time. So the rebellious movement of the hippies. Mm-hmm. Then you have obviously the abortion that became legalized, which is just a complete a complete. It
was a symptom,
right? Yeah.
It was a treatment. It was a treatment of a symptom of the culture. Like we have
it's a lack of trust. It's a lack of
pregnancies outside of wedlock. Well, we need to fix that.
Right. Which fall like right at the heels of no fault divorce. Then you have this, the social revolution that's dividing children from their parents, and the sexual revolution that's dividing the parents from their children. Mm-hmm. So there's separation from children to parent and separation from parent to child.
Right.
And Jason Craig makes this interesting analogy. I'm interested to hear your thoughts and why Star Wars was such a big show during the 70s. And he says, like, it appealed to so much of the youth because here we have Darth Vader, the parent
Yeah.
to Luke Skywalker, and the parent seems to be this secretly leaving evil empires, this distrust.
Leading.
Leading evil empires,
Uh-huh.
and this distrust in, like, who the parent is.
Yeah.
And the hippie rebellious movement could relate to Luke Skywalker and say, like, oh, yeah, I agree with this.
Right.
Which fed into this whole Star Wars
Yeah,
movement.
but we'll talk about it.
All right.
Can we open a door? It's like
Golly, yeah, it is hot.
Very hot.
I'll text Haley and see.
Muy caliente.
So the live stream went out, huh?
Well, it was buffering for like 5 minutes straight. I was like, nobody's gonna want to see that, so I just killed it.
Oh yeah.
But you're
That's
talking
weird.
about culture and I remember seeing these pictures of men in a baseball stadium. Everybody had like their fedoras on,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
and how we went from like fedoras to ball caps and hoodies versus like sports jackets and fedoras. Just like, yep, that's a group of men over there.
Yeah, I mean, you used to see like pictures. This would be like an ad of a man mowing his front yard in a suit. Like, maybe it wasn't like his work suit,
Yeah.
but like that just used to be what a man wore. You had a suit on. You know what I'm talking about? Have you ever seen that where like a dude is mowing the yard and he's got a suit on?
Yeah,
It's just an ad, like
I think I've seen that. Yeah.
I don't know how many. I doubt people did that necessarily very often, but actually one time when Pamela and I and the kids went down to visit Sean in Poto, he took us to a friend's house they're also kind of homesteading, and the guy was wearing like a tweed three-piece,
Mm-hmm.
and he was gallivanting around his land, and that was like, he also like restores tractors, and he was there driving tractors.
Mm-hmm.
It was like very old school, very awesome. And he was also a very interesting kind of guy, like he would make his own knives and restore old guns. And he homeschooled his kids. His wife actually was the breadwinner. But he was a professor at some point. It was anyways, really, it was a very interesting visit. But yeah, 3-piece suit. And it wasn't like, oh, I don't want to go outside because I have my suit on.
Right.
No, that's his outside suit.
Yeah, that's his digs.
Yeah.
I like
Which
it.
I also like.
Yeah.
Tough for me to actually like do it,
Especially if it's hot.
Yeah, it's hot, and like
Tweed is not fun when it's hot.
the way that often I'm working around, it's like, yeah, I'm just going to rip holes in this thing.
And it was a push lawnmower.
Yeah, that's what I
Yeah.
mean. Yeah, I mean the ads, they were push lawnmowers. And it's like, yeah. A man just used to wear a suit.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's a man.
Welcome back to the Catholic Man Show. Sipping on a little bit of this 36 cask strength from Ranger Creek, Texas straight bourbon whiskey. Talking about the development of the idea of a teenager, and then we'll talk about like what does that mean for youth ministry and things like that, which I think will be interesting. I know you will have some hot takes on that.
Yeah,
I
I will.
But so we were talking about like how youth ended up forming the culture in the 60s and 70s, right? Because it's rejection.
It still does. I mean,
it's carried on, but it started in
Yeah.
the 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
That was never a thing
right.
until the 60s and 70s, and now it does, and it has this ripple effect. We'll talk about that. But so like the youth has become the culture, and youthfulness is no longer a biological or development stage, but like a state of mind.
Uh-huh.
Right, where like this is something that I've talked to Haley about a lot. How I just think that we reject the beauty of aging. Right, that everybody wants to be like just continue to look youthful. Everybody wants to be like, I want to be young. I want to look young. I want to look young. And like, there's a beauty when you see an old man and an old woman together. Man and wife. Like, there's a beauty there that cannot be replicated.
Right.
Right. and it's that stage in life. But we try to almost reject this beauty to go back to this youthfulness, which is just like this state of mind, because it's a rejection of reality.
Right.
And so like this whole ethos of the self-fulfillment as the highest good in the 60s and 70s, right? Like this whole like, oh, as a teenager, like you just do whatever you feel like doing. It's this rejection of authority.
Have a great time.
Yeah, whatever's good for you is the right thing to do. You do you, I'll do me. You know, this moral relativism.
Yeah.
You can just see how it's had these ripple effects in culture to the point that now we don't even know what a boy and a girl is anymore. Right?
Right,
to
yeah.
the point of like, you know, and this is just downstream of all of this.
And you can see, I think you can clearly see how those two things are in fact related.
Yeah.
You know, it's not. I think that is a fair statement to make, that this idea of teenager culture has led to where we are today with, we don't even know what a man is, what a woman is.
Mm-hmm. And Jason Craig brings up this beautiful thought where this perversion of grown-ups wanting to act like children or be like children or like wanting to be accepted by children, right? Like even in movies and things like that, it's like
stand that
like where you see movies like in cinema where like the adults are trying to be friends with their children.
Yeah.
It's like, that's not your role.
I cannot stand that. You know, when you see like there's a parent who's trying to be the cool mom or
Right.
the whatever. It just drives me crazy.
Yeah, and Jason Craig,
And it's just such, it's rooted in such insecurities, you know, about adulthood or something.
well, yeah, and Jason brings up this beautiful thought of saying like God in the faith says that, you know, St. Augustine says that faith of ever ancient, ever new, not of forever young.
Yeah.
Right, so there's a beauty there, right? There's like this ever ancient and ever new, but it's not a forever young.
Right.
And reaching adulthood is like the end of childhood in the sense of its end of its purpose and fulfillment.
That's what it's for.
Right, and not the termination of like the good years, like whenever I didn't have any responsibilities. And then he quotes a lot of scripture, right? So he says like, you know, St. Paul talks about how do not be children in your thinking, and he tells Bishop Titus in Titus 2:6 he says, urge the young men to self-mastery. And even Aquinas talks about how prudence is like the most important virtue, right? He says it's the mother of all virtues. It's the governing virtue, and it guides all other virtues. But he says that children cannot be prudent, neither in habit nor in act, because they lack the requisite experience, which is why they need guides or mentors.
Yeah, so I think let me get back to what I was going to say.
That's why I wanted to get to this point, because I thought it would.
Yeah, I think that is a good
piggyback.
segue.
Yeah.
So today we have young men being called teenagers who, okay, then you turn 20. Oh, I'm not a teenager anymore. But nothing really changes. You know, you can still stay on your parents' health insurance till you're like 27 or something. I mean, it's
25, I think. Yeah.
whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's a long time. And these days, today, you have more adult children living at home than ever before. I mean, it's just a huge, and, you know, there are many reasons for that, not just cultural. Many of them are economic, but all the same, we're still here. So you have a young man who's now he has not up until recently viewed himself as a man. It's a big mystery in his mind when that happens. And I can remember going through that. I can remember being young and thinking, am I a man now? You know, like, am I good enough? Am I...
Yeah, because there's no rite of passage anymore.
Right. Am I worthy? Have I proven myself? You know, if I was tested now, would I pass the test, whatever it is, you know? I can remember wondering those things. And so you have a person who has accepted and maintained this mental thought about them as a boy or a teenager, not a man. Now I'm trying to become one. And it's happening at an older age when you're not at home. And you contrast that with the 13 or 14-year-old boy accepting the mantle of manhood and transitioning under the watchful care and guidance of his father.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, so it doesn't take a genius to figure out which of those two is going to be more successful.
Right.
Okay. You send a 20-something out into the world and he figures out himself what manhood is, or he is, very overtly and trained, and he knows at a young age, this is what it is. Now I'm a man, and this is what's expected of me because of it.
Right.
I mean, that's what should be happening. One of the things that Jason, one of the points he made, and he's got a book on this. What's it?
Leaving Boyhood
Behind. It's a new. No, it's not a new book. He does have a new book coming out, but that's not it.
Yeah.
Where one of the points that he makes is that we need to take young boys away from the women. At some point, children live in a female world, and that's good, okay, because they need the nurturing care of. I mean, this is just all part of God's plan. But for the young men, when they reach that age where, okay, it's time, we have to remove them from the world of women and now firmly plant them in the world of men. And that's just something that we don't do. Our culture, the way we raise children here, there's not once we got away from, okay, your father was a blacksmith, now you're going to be therefore you're a blacksmith. When we got away from that kind of culture and that kind of economy.
Yeah, mentorships.
It's hard to put the young boys in the world of men because dad's at work.
Right.
What are you going to...
The Industrial Revolution really killed that whole notion.
Right. Like the bank doesn't want you bringing your son to work with you every day and showing him how to use the computer. You know, like that's just not going to fly.
Right.
So I don't know what a good solution is, because unless you work from home, I think opportunity to raise your son, in the world of men is tricky.
Right, but this also goes back to the importance of having good male friendships around you, right? Because like the friendships that we have, here with Juan and you and Jim and like all of our buddies, Scott and all of our buddies, like when we're talking and my children are even there present, my boys are there present, they realize, oh, this is how men talk. These are the things that men talk about.
Yeah.
This is how men, have conversations. And it reinforces the conversations that you and I have, that Juan and I have, that we have together. It reinforces even more so than just me teaching them by myself.
Right. When your son hears one of your friends say the things that you've been teaching your son,
right,
he's like, oh.
It really forges that thought together.
Dad was telling me about that.
Right.
That's a real thing. And Adam, I think that's a good point about, first, you need to have, if you want to raise your boy to be a man, first, you need to have good male friendships. And then one way you can start to bring him into the world of men, as we're putting it, is to, when you're doing things with your peers, once he reaches a certain age, invite him along. So that, hey, we're going to go have a cigar. Maybe maybe he's too young to have a cigar. I don't know. But I mean, at some point, if he's a man and you want him to be a man, I am not advocating that you give your 14-year-old son a cigar, but there are just there's a time for you to become a man, and you're at least maybe going to come hang out, okay, and listen to the conversation, be a part of it,
right,
or whatever the event is, that is for men. Okay, well, it's time that he comes,
especially if it's a service act, right? Because
sure,
what I think really solidifies that is it really pulls them out of a self-gratification, right? Because the problem with teenagers is it's all about self-esteem. It's all about what I feel, self-indulgence, how can the world please me? And being a true man is just laying a self-sacrificial life, right? So any kind of act of service that you have, you show him this is how you lay down your life for others. This is how you truly love somebody else. Those type of moments, I think, really show this is what's preparing you for manhood.
Yeah,
it's not while cigars are great and things like that. These are lower goods compared to the higher goods of this self-sacrificial love. And I think that's what he
I think
he
you're
needs
totally
to
right.
see.
Yeah.
Like while the cigars and the whiskey and things like that, this facilitate good conversations, which are what they need to hear. Is
Yeah.
what good conversations are
A
between
lot of
men.
good, a lot of good there too,
But they need to see men in action.
sure.
And men in action and love. And that prepares them to lay down their life either for the church, the bride of Christ, or for their bride in their vocation.
Amen.
Yeah, we can-
That air feels good.
Yeah, that's way better.
Welcome back to the Catholic Man Show. I'm David Niles. Here with Adam Minahan, we're talking about teenagers and how they don't exist.
This new concept.
This new concept called teenagers.
It is really weird to think about, though.
bad
You know,
concept.
your great grandparents had no idea of this concept.
Yeah.
And this is it's
Oh, of a teenager.
of
yeah.
a teenager, and it's penetrated our culture so much so that we have not even thought about this.
Yeah, so the baby boomer generation, I guess, would have been the first teenager.
Probably, yeah. Which is wild.
They're the worst. Sorry, Jim. I don't mean that, but
Well, okay, so here
I know some lovely baby boomers. I'm just gonna say that.
yes. So so
As a generation, though, they had some problems.
as all generations do, but
Yeah,
they have their own.
that is
yes.
true. That is true.
So here's the deal: if we have grown, physically grown men still acting like boys, like what does that look like in the Catholic realm? Like how does that affect them in their spirituality? How does that affect them in the church?
Yeah.
And these have big ramifications as well, right? Because up until the 60s, youth ministry wasn't a thing.
Yeah, or think about this. When you go and read the lives of the saints, very often at 17, they were in the seminary.
Mm-hmm.
They had discerned their vocation. Okay? A teenager is incapable of discerning his vocation because he refuses to accept the mantle of adulthood, of the rest of my life. The teenager doesn't care about the rest of his life. He only is
Cares
living
about the now.
today, right?
Right.
It's like, oh, I don't care. It's like, I don't care about next year, whatever. Like, let's just play video games, right? And so during those important moments when he should be discerning, and you see, this is why people don't get married until they're like 30 now or later.
Because they've just prolonged the growth.
Right, because they should have started at 14 and they didn't start until they're 24.
Right.
Actually thinking about the rest of their life and what is it that they want? What are the good, what good things do they want to pursue? And who do they want to pursue it with? So
Yeah.
it's just,
It has
the
effects.
vocation. That's what I was trying to say. It's
Yeah.
like it's that too. In talking about your spiritual, our spiritual lives, and well, that's a big component of it, because discerning the priesthood, a lot of that happens, and is it's a beneficial time to do it when you are at home.
Yeah, so if we've created this new category, sort of relatively new, right, of teenager,
Yeah.
The church has decided, okay, well, if there's this new category, we need to minister to these people, right?
Yeah.
And this in no way is belittling the desire to evangelize these people, to bring them to Christ, or
Right.
the people who's
Sure.
doing it in any way, shape, or form. But there's obviously issues here because we've created a new category, so we haven't foreseen the ramifications and the missteps. If you start out on a misstep at the very beginning, then you can't see the ramifications of that down the line and how big they really are until you actually get there. Right? You have no foresight of like, oh, wow, we really missed the boat here until it's way down the line.
Yeah.
So in this book, Thomas Bergler has this book called The Juvenilization of American Christianity. And he's talking about like this whole idea of youth ministry and how it's come to be. And he says in here, I'll quote, he says, while sincere in design, youth ministry sometimes ends badly, with both youth and adults embracing immature versions of their faith. If maturing youth is the goal, not only are we failing, but we're also perpetrating immaturity in adults.
Right.
So his thought process, or what he's saying here is like, oh well, because they're not adults yet, we have to kind of dumb down the faith or water down the faith.
Yeah.
And we're lowering the bar, for these children. Well, we don't do that with any other subject. Math, science, history, like any of these.
Well, we are starting to do those things now.
We haven't in the past, right? And so, but what ends up happening is the teachers in themselves end up dumbing down everything, and they end up taking the faith at a very very surface level faith, because that's what they're teaching, and the teenagers are also doing that as well.
I mean, there are many, many, many youth programs that essentially have just been boiled down to, this is a safe space for you to like go and be with your friends, and that's what the parents view it as. Like, oh, good, you went to youth group, so I know you're not getting pregnant. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Is like, good, this is like considered for me a safe environment for you to spend time with boys and girls,
right?
And if that's all that we are expecting of from our children with regard to their spiritual life or whatever. I mean, and I know that the youth program is not like that's what we're expecting from you, but it's just an absolute waste of time.
Well, so St. Paul talks about, he laments this idea of, to the Corinthian church, right? He blames them for their spiritual immaturity. He says that he could not even address them as spiritual men, but as infants in Christ.
Yeah.
So Burglar actually, he goes on and he says,
I like that line. It's a funny one.
It's like
you're not ready for solid food.
It's like I have to still milk feed you.
Right.
Feed you. Yeah. So Burglar actually talks about how, he says, our faith is immature in a way that Aristotle said that young friendships can be immature, based on utility or benefit for the individual, pleasure and ease, right? So utilitarian or for pleasure. He says, just as modern Western culture created teenagers as a consumer group and continues to coddle it in perpetuity, so too a youth ministry that mimics the youth culture creates a subgroup between child and adult that perpetrates a self-referential spiritual adolescence.
Totally.
And so it's like, man, that hits. I don't know, that rings true so much. I mean, Father Gary Goulet-Grange, he had his most infamous or famous, right? Not infamous. His most famous writings, probably, the three stages of the spiritual life. He talks about how the life of each saint passes from childhood to adulthood to old age. He didn't talk about anything about the teenage years,
right,
or adolescence, or anything like that. So I just think like so okay, hold on. Let me just I'll say this, and I want to get your thoughts on this. Okay. So St. Paul says that when he was a child, he acted and spoke like a child, but when he grew up, he put away his childish things. We've heard this all before, right? And this comes from 1 Corinthians. This comes right after 1 Corinthians 13, which is the passage that everybody uses at the wedding. Love is patient. Love is kind. He talks about all these things, like what is love. So he says, like, what is love? He asks, what is love?
Don't hurt me.
Yeah, don't hurt me. So he talks about like what is love, and then he says, when I put away when I grew up, I put away childish things. So in other words, like love, which is the summary of the Christian life, right, is found in maturity and is proven in the willingness and ability to sacrifice for the Christian community in love. He says maturity is restrained and unfree, bound to God and the crosses he sends and the people he binds us to. True freedom is not youthful unattachment, but the loss of the types of freedom the world pursues.
Right, because we fundamentally misunderstand freedom. I mean, that's a whole other topic.
Right.
That freedom is not just the ability to do as you please. It's the ability to choose the good. So freedom very, very often has the appearance of being very restraining. Okay, you take marriage for example. You have the freedom to love this person. At the same time, you have excluded yourself from all other women or all other men, right? And so it looks like, oh, what a ball and chain, right? We even call it that. That looks like the opposite of freedom. But actually, it's because of those things that you're free, right? And so this is the problem with teenagers or the concept of teenagers. Like, oh, I want to be free. But it's only because you're an idiot and you don't know what you're doing that you think that that's what freedom is.
Right.
You know, and you could be pursuing the true, the good, and the beautiful in a way that would actually set you free. And instead you're pursuing me, myself, and, whatever is next, and you're a slave to it.
Yeah. So I wanted to understand, like, okay, where did this youth ministry come from? Like, where was the first cases of youth ministry?
Yeah.
And
John Bosco.
No, but they do talk about John Bosco. But
I mean,
it's a different type.
You're talking about like for the teenager.
For the teenager,
yeah,
yeah,
because
yeah.
there's always been
in fact,
like
that's a different
catechism for the youth.
Right, but I'm talking about like youth ministry as it is today.
Okay.
So like the methods were from.
I don't know if John Bosco, he didn't invent it either.
No,
he just
he ministered to yeah. But many methods of youth ministry were formed by this a Protestant by the name of Jim Rayburn, who created Young Life. A lot of people have heard of Young Life.
Okay, yeah.
In the 1940s, and Young Life was like focused on the importance of relationships through like informal fun gatherings to like kind of slip the gospel in. Like, oh, let's have dance or fun. Some kind of like acting or some kind of like gathering together and fun. And then we'll kind of slip the gospel in, create the community. It's kind of like a sub church to welcome the unchurched into our church, right? Let's get them involved in the community and then bring them into church.
Okay.
Right. So this is like a lot of the, you see a lot of that concept widely even in the Catholic realm. Right. But the problem is, but in the Catholic family case, not only does it belong to the parents, the vocation to inform their children, not to convince them, but to inform them and instruct them. It has been proven the most effective means of transmitting the faith. So it's not about this like convincing, like, oh, let's get together and like look at all this fun community and then like let's go to church and hopefully you can convince them to buy into it. But as a Catholic family, as a Catholic parent, it's to instruct and inform, not to convince your children of the faith.
Yeah.
So we'll continue this conversation. We're on the Lord's team.
The winning side.
So raise your glass.
Cheers to Jesus. That really is an important distinction to keep in mind, right? Because if you spend your time trying to convince them, you start pandering to their wants and needs, or not to their needs, but to their desires.
You're really selling.
Yeah,
You're no longer like evangelizing. You're no longer like preaching the gospel. You're trying to sell it.
Right. Which it makes it cheap.
Right. It cheapens it.
Right. Yeah, because the convincing should be they're witnessing your own belief, right? If it's true, then they should see that you certainly believe it's true in the way that you live. In like, well, do you have a prayer life? Or do you lead a sacramental life? How often do you go to confession? Right? How does your faith express itself in your personal relationships? In the way you go to work, all that kind of stuff. That is the thing that will be convincing.
Right.
But and going back to the convincing side and then selling it, if you were to see an embodiment of that
not convincing, informing them and instructing them.
No, but if you were to be convincing, if you see an embodiment of that, would be that movement of the sacrament of confirmation, moving down to the teenage years.
Right.
Towards like, now he may not want to do it, but I'm going to have to convince him that this is the right thing to do.
There's a lot of ramifications there. Yeah, I think that's a great point because
I don't know when it got moved to high school. That would be an interesting thing to look up about when that happened.
I'm pretty sure I know, but I'm not positive, so I'll hold it. But
how prudent of you, Adam.
Yeah, I'm not positive, but there's a lot of people trying to go back to the restored order, where they
that's what we do. I
Yeah.
like it.
I mean, I think that it's so important to try to receive the sacrament of confirmation before they hit puberty. You want to have them have the access to these
All the graces, baby. I
Yeah.
want them all.
before they get there. Yeah, so I think this is kind of where the rubber hits the road, like as far as youth ministry, right? Because it's easy to point the finger of like, oh, well, youth ministry has not been effective, right? Because like
Well, that's true.
it hasn't, and the reason why a lot of times is I think that we try to sell youth on emotion and passions, right? Which is part of the faith. Like, this is part, having emotions and passions, like, is part of the faith, and they can be used as good. They can also be used as bad. But that's not what, like, brings you into, like, the true relationship with Jesus, right? Because
Right.
emotions come and go. Any married man knows that emotions towards your wife come and go.
Sure.
But it's not the emotions that drive the vocation.
Right.
Right? And so I think that this is why I think a lot of Protestant churches have a high revolving door, like rotating
In their
of youth
youth
in
program.
the youth program, because they sell them on this emotional high, right?
And they sell it well, and
And they do a great job at it.
Right.
But the problem is as we know, with dopamine hits and with like emotions, like the more you do that, the more that's what they come to expect.
It wears off.
And
yeah.
it wears, and the more you have to increase that
You gotta
to keep
up
it
the
going.
ante, yeah.
And eventually you can't sustain that.
Right.
And so the problem, I think, a lot of times with these youth ministries is we try to get a bunch of kids there, do praise and worship band, hold your hands up, like get the emotions going.
Yeah.
And that's a surface level emotional thing that's going to wear off. Same with like when you go to Cursillo, same with Acts or anything else. Like you have this spiritual high, but then it falls off. And if you don't have roots planted deep,
Something
you're
to do
gonna
with it, right.
you're gonna wither up and die.
Right.
And so the problem is
Yeah, and not that there's anything wrong with
any of those things. I mean, they're
right.
And this is what I kind of started out by
Yeah.
saying. Like this isn't a condemnation of youth ministry,
Certainly not.
but
Or well, I think actually it is a condemnation of youth ministry, but not a condemnation of the people in youth ministry who are working very hard to do their best to serve certainly not condemning these people.
I would counter with that. It's not necessarily the
you
problem.
are condemning the people.
No.
Okay.
No. No, I would counter with saying that it's not necessarily the youth ministry issue, but it's the parent issue.
Right.
Because-
but the thing is, the whole point of our conversation today is that we're pandering to this idea of teenagers, like as if there's such thing as a spiritual teenager, right? A teenager doesn't even exist, and we've created now spiritual teenagers,
Right.
and so that is so. I actually, from that point of view, am condemning the idea of youth ministry, in as much as it promotes the concept of a spiritual teenager. Okay, we don't need spiritual teenagers. We need our adults growing in their faith life.
Right, and that's so if you're informing and instructing your children in the faith, if your children went to something like this is not something that they would be seeking after.
Yeah.
Or if if it was, it could be used as a good, right? Praise and worship is great. Can be a very good.
It can be good anyway.
It can be good. Even like an emotional high for so to speak, for Jesus, like in some way is a good thing. But it's only going
Jesus
to
very often. I mean, in my own life, he has clearly spoken to me in those moments. Used those mountaintop experiences as a way of calling me. And I think everybody.
But if the
people
foundation,
get that.
I guess the point I'm trying to make is like if the foundation isn't there, then the seed cannot take root.
Sure. No. Yeah. Totally.
And so, while I think, I think it's very clear in the 80s and 90s and maybe even early 2000s, even today, a lot of parents think that, I instruct my kids in the faith by sending them to CCD or whatever,
Catholic school.
or to Catholic school or whatever they call, whatever they call the religious ed program in the diocese, and that's how I teach them the faith.
Right.
And that's just a neglect
it's an attitude. So if you find yourself in that, so like, oh well, I'm sending my kids to Catholic school, therefore I'm educating them in the faith. I'm just going to be blunt with you. You're failing your children most likely when it comes to educating them in the faith. Okay, and once again, I'm not condemning anybody's intentions, right? But sending them to Catholic school is not enough. Okay, send them to public school and then actually like invest yourself into them. They'll be much better off from a spiritual standpoint because they can only receive the faith from you. You are the primary educator, okay? And if they don't see it in you, then just like all the other kids that you see are running around, yep, they'll go to mass until they go away, and then they'll stop because they don't have to anymore.
The Catechism 2223 is a great spot for all parents to go look up and like understand like what is the duties of a parent to their children passing the faith. And really, I think one of the best ways we can help our teens like move from this self-centeredness, because this is what it is, right? It's a lack of maturity. It's a lack of maturation of not only emotional, but it's spiritual, and as they're growing in the physical way, is pulling them out of themselves and showing like what a man truly is a man is another Christ, of laying down his life for that of the other.
Yeah, a willing victim.
Right.
Yeah. So you were a couple times you've used the analogy of mountaintop experience, but if you don't have that foundation, it's not going to be it's not going to do you much good. So for a young man, what is that foundation? Is it is it an understanding of who I am, what I'm called to be? Is that the foundation, or is it something else?
Well, hopefully the foundation is being built within the home, right? But obviously, at some point in your life, whether you're 8 or 16, 32, 64, whatever the age is, eventually you're going to ask, like, who am I and why am I here?
Yeah.
Right. And the Baltimore Catechism, beautiful catechism to teach your children with, and to help you, inform you of the faith.
Right.
Like it talks about how like the reason why we're here is to know, love, and serve our Lord in this life, so that we may have eternal life with Him forever in heaven. Mm-hmm. So it's like, okay, well, before I can serve Him, I have to know Him. So how do I know Him? Well, that's prayer.
Yeah.
Right. And then once you fall deeper and deeper in love with Him through prayer, then you're able to serve Him more. You're able to know His will for you in your life. The discernment process in your life becomes a lot easier. Right, because you're no longer having to be really like, Lord, what are you wanting from me? Like what, and like trying to just what I call like pray, like cramming in prayer, like like you used to study and cram.
Yeah.
Like you can.
Is there another way to do it?
Yeah, there actually is. Like, and you can do this with prayer too, right? Like where you have like these hiatuses in prayer, and then all of a sudden you have something big that comes up, and you're like hoping for this transactional relationship with Jesus, right? Where I put in a bunch of time all of a sudden. And then, like, I'm hoping to get the thing that I'm, wanting out of the deal. Yeah. Well, that's not actually how you learn, right? It's an input-output thing.
Right.
It's also not how you develop a relationship with our Lord.
Yeah.
So the more you know Him, the better you're able to discern His will for you in your life, and the more that you unite your will with His, you're able to love Him more fully. Because you're created in the way in which He's desired you to be created.
Yeah. So you think that's the foundation?
To know, love, and serve Him.
Yeah. So Christopher West, one of the things he mentions in his classic 10 CD set from the early 2000s, back when they still had CDs, young people, like, I mentioned my sister getting engaged. I asked Tom something about burning CDs. I asked him, have you ever burned a CD the other day? And he said, no. I remember seeing burned CDs, and like, I know that like we had some or something.
I know that they existed.
Right. That's what it was. It was like, dang it. I feel so old. But anyway,
You don't know how many hours that took to burn that CD.
Right, back in the day, Christopher West had these it was 10 CDs, this long thing. And the point is that he said the most important question a man can ask himself is, what does it mean to be a man? Okay? And for a woman, what does it mean to be a woman, right? What does that mean? The fact that I am a man, what does that mean for my life? Like, there's a lot of big answers. People are going through life with all these questions. And there are a lot of big answers in just that. What does it mean to be a man? Okay, well, I am a man. Just recognize that. And therefore, I'm called to X. I'm called to do certain things. If you're a woman, all right, well, now you're called to these other things. And those are good. All of these things are good. And so, we mentioned earlier that today we don't even know what a man and a woman is. So we're talking about a fundamental confusion in reality that it's just not there. We don't even know what reality is, what is real. And so I think that really is a big part of that foundation, okay? Because a boy doesn't need to be told what a boy is, because it just is childhood happens. It just, you just have this imagination. The things that children do, they just are that way. And it's very beautiful. It's a gift that
there's innocence there.
That the vocation of childhood is so you can see God just in his absolute care for children, right? In the way that he provides them with their imagination, with their appetites, with their questions, with their just the beauties of childhood. But then, as God does for all of us, he calls us to greater things, calls us to stand on our own two legs, right? So he begins to
establish us. Exactly.
Good tie back, Adam. So we need to know, what is a man? And that's what we don't know. And so we need to have that. That, I think, is the essential. Okay, right. We have to get that in the minds of our young boys. What is it? It's a duty to the other. Right, so it's a call to love.
Right.
Okay, and you can say the same thing about women. Okay, being a woman is also a call to love. Well, no, we need to very clearly understand how we express that in different ways. But
yeah, so I bring this back. Leo is he's 3 years old, almost 4 years old now.
Yeah, it's time for him to get a job.
Yeah. Leo is a very, he's, like I said, I've said this before, but he's like probably my funniest kid that I have. Like, he's hilarious.
He told me that you're getting him a 300 blackout
gun for his birthday.
A real one.
A real one.
He told me that. And a motorcycle.
And a motorcycle, right.
And he was absolutely convinced
I think that's the
that
case.
You said he was going to get a real 300 blackout and a motorcycle.
One that shoots real. That's what he says. Shoots real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was not kidding.
Right. So I know he wasn't. So
it's gonna be a terrible birthday.
Yeah, it's gonna be such a big letdown.
It's gonna be the worst birthday of his life.
So when Leo, so he's at home by himself right now because with the 3 other older kids, they're going to school.
He's a latchkey kid at 3.
I don't know what that means.
It's when you're home by yourself with no parents.
No. So but he didn't have.
Oh, your wife is here. Okay, gotcha.
So he didn't have the older kids at home. So he's finding himself with a lot of free time.
Yeah.
And he's he's kind of a mischievous kid sometimes, right? But he thrives on duty, things in which he has that I rely on him to do. And whenever we give him things to do,
I need you to do
this. I need you to do this.
Yeah.
He is so good at it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so he understands what his goal and his objective is, and he understands what he has to do and the things in which it's going to take to get these things done. But when he doesn't have something like that is when he gets into trouble.
Yeah.
When he
idle hands.
Right. And this is the whole teenager. Right? This is the whole category of teenager, is that we have not given them the duties of an adulthood. We've said no, you're not ready for this yet.
Mm-hmm.
Which they are, which is it's false, but we're telling them you don't have, you're not old enough to have this duty, and so then they have this idle hands while hormones are going crazy, and they get into trouble.
Yeah,
and they fall into this whole self gratification, like self-esteem as far like what do I think of myself? Like how am I into the world? Like this is the St. Augustine.
What do you think? What do you think about this idea of your 13-year-old son going and getting a job? I don't know. That might be hard to do it. Might be hard to get hired at 13.
Well, I
We'll
think
say maybe 14. I think there are places you can get hired at 14.
maybe.
And
But I think you
this
can.
is just now. I just am thinking about this right now. So this isn't. This thought is
Raw
not,
thought.
Yeah, this is very raw. But having them get a job and they don't get to keep any of the money, it all goes to the family. Even if you don't even though you as the dad, probably you make enough money to pay for everything. You don't need them to go get a minimum wage job. But it would just be that now you're 14. It's time to stop acting. It's time to start acting like a man and providing. Now, you don't have a wife and children, but you are part of a family, and therefore, you will work, and the money will go to the family.
I think I like the idea better.
It's a raw thought.
Yeah, I think I like the idea better.
Jim is shaking his head big time no over there.
I like the idea better of this is your money, but here's what you have to do. Here's what you should be doing with it. So you're developing, you're saying, you understand. You're giving them the habits of here's how you tithe. These are the other things that you have to do with money. Because if you just give it all, if he doesn't get a chance to just have it,
Yeah. Okay. I like it.
then they can't. Then
on board.
he can't develop the habits of I have a duty to the church. I have a duty to other people. I have a duty to save. You have financial responsibility.
Sure.
And so I think that.
I think that's a good point. That maybe part of that duty is to the family, but he needs to be the one to distribute it,
Right.
and to pay,
right.
and manage. Yeah.
So I don't know. I just think obviously I have 4 boys. My oldest is getting into the quote unquote teenage years, and so I'm really thinking about this a lot more, and trying to understand how do I establish my sons to be men of the church. What do I need to do?
Yeah.
To show them that the way to life is to lay down your life. If you die before you die, then you won't die when you die. That is the mantra in which I want them to understand.
Do it now.
But earlier you were also saying that it is about the roots having in the family,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that is. Meanwhile,
I said hopefully it is.
yeah, but that's a very limited scope, because if it's almost like the fertile soil is within a group of men that you eventually invite him to join, and you cannot be a group. You're a father, right? So it's but going back to the community aspect, it's a man of the church means belonging to something greater than yourself, means something greater than your family, and that's where it's that's where in humility you recognize your limitations. It's I can be the best father that I can be, but I cannot be a community, and that's where you have to go outside of yourself and build that community.
Absolutely.
To where
the importance of friendship.
Yeah. I think that's a good point. Yeah, because the family is an imperfect society.
Yes.
But I think it's also true. I think you were probably saying that it's got to start. Obviously, it starts at home.
But it doesn't mean it's the crescendo. It doesn't mean it's the end all.
Yeah, but I think that's a good point, Juan. That the sweet spot is ultimately when you have that community that he can be called and invited into.
You had a beautiful example with Luke before his first communion, right? We took that fishing trip where it's we were all men and he was the only invited.
No shirts.
I had my. You remember my?
Was just me. Was it just me?
Do you remember my mega jig? My mega gig.
Your what?
My mega jig.
Yes,
I had
that.
the spinner. I had all of them.
Yes.
But it's that was a perfect example of here's a group of men.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, me too.
Here's a group of men. And
Caught so many fish.
Yeah.
You could snag somewhere. But it's here's a perfect example of
why.
Into your hat, I think.
No, that's another. But it's here's a group of men, and you are invited to join us because now you are part of this circle.
Yeah.
that you were not before because you've gone to receive the sacraments.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, this is it was a somewhat kind of a rite of passage, right?
So last thing, I just want to kind of revisit this again.
Okay.
This is the last thing because I know we got to wrap this up. About discerning your vocation and how we need to start calling our young boys to manhood soon, early, right? I just got to kind of mention this, but when it comes to the priesthood, it is very hard to discern. It gets harder, I should say, to discern it later in life. If you have to work a job, and like pay for your own living, and now, okay, you're finally coming around to taking life seriously in your 20s. Now I'm discerning the priesthood. It just is harder to do when you're on your own. Now, if you are
Why?
15, 16, 17,
Why is that?
because you have to like have a day job and go to work, as opposed to, hey, maybe I don't have to pay for my own living, and so I can devote more time, like while I'm living with my parents, still, in school.
Okay.
It's easier for you to, hey, I'm gonna go do this, I'm gonna spend time doing these things because I don't have to like work.
Okay.
You don't see that as a
No.
okay?
But I think I see your point, but I don't see that being a hindrance,
Okay.
because like it's still you're still self, like, why am I working? Like, well, I have to sustain myself. It's like, well, if I go to the priesthood, I don't have to do that anymore.
Okay, so you're not going to be able to like just take a month off and go discern with a religious community if you have a job.
No. You can't do that when you're a kid.
No, but if you're starting that whole process, that mental process, that spiritual prayerful thing,
Sure.
okay,
I guess that
by
could
the
be-
time
that could be, yeah.
by the time you graduate from high school and now you're thinking about college, what is it that I'm actually like, okay, this has been on my heart now for a while. I want to do this. Okay.
Okay.
You have the freedom to go and do it without having to say like, well, am I going to lose my job? Do I have to quit my job just so I can go like see about this religious community for a month or for 3 weeks or whatever? So once you like start going down the secular path of life, things start moving, and it just gets harder and harder to stop the wheels and go back the other way if you decide, actually, I'm called not to the secular life, but to a different way of life, So having begun that mental process earlier, which doesn't happen. I mean, it just, in most people, I don't think they're so caught up in just what they're doing, being a teenager, that it hasn't even occurred to them until later in life that, hey, maybe I should ponder these things.
Yeah, well, that's because, again, teenagers a lot of times are self-gratifying,
Right.
children.
Yeah.
And so if you're trying to self-gratify, you're not thinking about, like, what is the Lord calling me to?
Mm-hmm. Anyway, that's my last point.
All right. Yeah. It's just an interesting topic. It's an interesting thing to think about and ponder, and hopefully, like, it'll give you an opportunity to maybe study a little bit more about it and then think about it for your own family.
And I highly recommend Jason's book.
Yes. Leaving Boyhood Behind. And getting a subscription to Sword and Spade.
Awesome.
Cheers. How long was that?